Hi everyone and welcome back to the Secret Sunday session. Today I'm joined by Georgie Collinson, which I am very privileged to have on today because we are not only going to be talking a lot about the work that she is doing in the anxiety space, but also discussing a bit about body image and eating disorders and how that can contribute to anxiety as well. And she is doing amazing things in this space, has also written a book that has talked a lot about anxiety. So I feel like we're going to be learning a lot. I know I definitely am. So I cannot wait to jump in. Firstly, though, welcome, Georgie. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and just share as much as I can.
Amazing. Now, for those people that don't know who you are, who is Georgie and what is she doing with herself?
Georgie is, well, I am a anxiety therapist, so I help women with especially the high functioning anxiety. These are our high achievers, perfectionists, place a ton of pressure on themselves, but may also find that they end up in a state of burnout, or maybe all of a sudden they're experiencing panic attacks out of nowhere, which is a very terrifying, out of control kind of experience to get into, especially when they start recurring. Or it might be that some kind of health condition pops up or won't resolve because of that chronic anxiety and the pressure. Maybe we're getting sleep issues, maybe we're getting gut issues. I have a lot of like unresolved IBS cases that don't, respond to the gastroenterologist and the other investigations. And then we figure out, okay, it's actually all about what's happening in the mind and our trauma and our anxiety and that kind of thing and stuff. And when we work on that, we find resolution. So I help women to master their anxious mind. We're not getting rid of anxiety. That just happens to be what we experience. Much less anxiety, much more confidence in ourselves when we do this work to really shift our relationship with anxiety. We can really feel like we're back in control of our lives, and it's a beautiful thing to do.
I love this because I feel like this topic and this issue as such is so commonly shared by so many people. So I have so many questions. But firstly, why? Why get into this space? We know this space is very hard and it's difficult to stay in because normally you're working with people for not a short period of time. You work with them generally their whole entire lifetime sometimes. Why did you want to get into this work?
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that you have asked me that question in that specific way, because already I get to open our minds, which are just naturally limited by what we perceive and what we've learned to believe about ourselves. We're always living with a sort of almost like you can imagine there's like a box around you of what you think is possible for you and for other people. And, as humans, our potential is so much vaster than what we can see. So the first thing is, the women that work with me, we work together in a 4-month program, and then they don't need me anymore. They graduate from me because the kind of work that's actually possible and the shifts we can experience once we do really delve into our trauma and our past emotional experiences, we have space to release that stuff. It creates a permanent transformation. We don't have to keep going around in circles through years and years of therapy. And that's when you're really delving into the subconscious mind, which a lot of talk therapy, it's great for awareness, but people often find that they are cycling around years and years in the same process. And actually, that was my experience. I never really found the right person to work with for me. No doubt there are just so many different, amazing, talented people that work in this field, lots of highly empathetic and really passion-driven people. But for me, I never connected with someone that was like the right person for me. They'd tell me things like, well, you seem really self-aware. And I was just like, okay, I need, like, this isn't helping. You're just telling me things that I already know. And I wanted to dig deeper and find those, what was actually causing my ongoing patterns and how could I actually shift that? How could I do the healing so that the pattern didn't keep coming up for me? And it started with learning naturopathy. I mean, as always, to answer your question of why I got into this work, it was to find the answers for myself. Like, how could I feel better? Because anxiety was such a dominant experience in my life, whole long family history of that. My grandmother, my mother, my sister, like everyone My brother too, like everyone experiences anxiety. Not everyone's aware of it or talks about it as so much, but it's definitely there. It was the norm that I grew up in. And I just started to expect that I was going to be stuck like that for the rest of my life, living in this sort of high strung way, having a big emotional reaction to any kind of change of plan or anything that looked like it wasn't going wrong, getting this shot of adrenaline and cortisol through my body like multiple times a day because something's gone wrong. I've got so much to do. Oh gosh, I almost had like a near accident in like driving my car, like just feeling so on edge all the time. That was normal for me. And it was what was sort of like demonstrated in my experience. And I wanted to find solutions, especially the big catalyst for me was when I was 19 and my parents split up. It was devastating for me. And I woke up in the morning after that, like years and years on repeat, just thinking to myself, this same story, this has gone wrong. It shouldn't be like that. My parents should still be together. My life has gone wrong. My family's like, dissolved and shattered. Like I just feel that everything's gone wrong. And I started to connect with this idea that if I can explore what's going on inside my body and take care of my physical health, maybe I can impact how I feel emotionally and mentally. So there was a lot of this emphasis at that time around clean eating. I got way too obsessive with food rules. I did all the wrong things in the sense of actually making my anxiety worse. But the benefit was it did lead me to study naturopathy and nutrition and to learn all the ins and outs of what's going on with our hormones and our gut health and how all of that can play a positive role. As I said, I had some wobbly feet in that process, but figured out the balance at the end of the day. But then I was working with people as a general naturopath. I was working with all kinds of different conditions. And it was only, I noticed I could give someone the perfect treatment plan. I could give them all the supplements. I could say, now do this for your gut health. And, this is what you need to do, these deep breaths in the morning. And people just wouldn't always respond to it. In fact, we often have these self-sabotaging patterns that come in, or the chronic stress, the same beliefs that are and the same thoughts that are driving that rise in cortisol every day, but just almost impossible for our meager little supplements to make a big impact. There's all this like really exciting emphasis on things like adaptogens you might have heard of, things like ashwagandha and ginseng. They can be amazing for helping our body to cope with high cortisol, cope with high stress lives. But at the end of the day, are we meant to pep ourselves up on this stuff every single day and just try and push through? Or do we start looking at why we are forcing and pressurizing ourselves so much and striving for perfection? Why don't we go for the root cause? So I did further training. I learned how to work with the subconscious mind and really dig out those traumas from the past. Most of the time, we're trying to look for and seek someone else's approval. We're trying to live a life based on what other people want for us rather than what we truly want. So we're living out of alignment with who we really are pretty much most of the time. And the anxiety, we start to realize, is a messenger. And it's there for a reason. And it's calling you back to who you actually are. It's telling you you are so off track from who you are, who you're meant to be, who you feel best being in this life, the right way of living life for you, that we're just going to send these alarm bells off until you stop and listen. And sometimes that's going to get us to the point of burnout. Sometimes it's going to get us to the point of having a panic attack and going to the hospital. Like it's different for everyone. But that's what I discovered. And that's what really helped me create a deep, lasting change in my own life. And now, thankfully, for hundreds of clients across the world. And now with the book out there, The Anxiety Reset Method, it's reaching thousands and thousands of people, which is really, really cool.
It's just incredible. And even hearing you say that in the way that anxiety is like the messenger from the body, I think that is so fascinating that generally, yeah, the body can't talk to us. It can't communicate in the way that we can communicate to others. And if it is sending us signals like that, we shouldn't be ignoring it or band-aiding it. We should be opening our ears, listening, and learning how we can navigate that or what's coming up for us.
Totally. And I think the impulse is whenever we get a symptom from our body, or our body isn't doing what we want it to do, we like, let's say you're experiencing like multiple different illnesses, or your body always gets sick. Uh we start to feel like it's like cursing us, or our body's against us and betraying us. And if we can start to invite in curiosity there and say, actually, what's my body trying to tell me? It's not just because, like, poor me, I have bad luck. Obviously, sometimes there are, like, I'm not going to pretend that there's not privilege in this world and more advantageous conditions and circumstances that people live their lives in. But most of the time, still, regardless, the body is responding to an environment, to the way that you're living your life, and it's trying to tell you something, and it's actually coming from a really loving place because your body wants you to thrive. So it might come up with chronic headaches or an autoimmune condition because it's trying to get you to address what needs to change. Maybe it's wanting you to rest, maybe it's wanting you to slow down, and you haven't been listening to the other calls and the other ways that your body's been trying to tell you to do that. And it's only when we have these symptoms that often we do give ourselves permission to stop. Some people, there's this interesting thing where some people say, like, my job is killing me. I just need a break. Like, this is making me sick. Like, I just hate this job. And they keep getting sick. They'll get like a cold and have to take a week off work all the time. And it's like, because that's the only way. Firstly, their mind is telling their body, my work makes me sick. So that's what they experience. But also, it's the only way they get a break. It's the only way they'll give themselves permission to actually stop.
What about the people that it's crazy because some of us know this. Like we know that, as you said, like when we go into workplaces and we feel sick, we get that gut feeling, we take days off, we feel mentally drained. We know the symptoms are there, but we refuse to listen. And why do you think people avoid going to those places and trying to understand why?
I love this question. The reason we are so good at ignoring our symptoms is just the same as the reason why we're so good at ignoring our emotions and how we feel. Because majority of us, whether we're fully aware of it or accepting of this concept or not, grew up in a family system where we had to fit in and belong somehow. And often what we learned was the things that feel normal and natural to you, you got to suppress some of those because that's not convenient or allowed, or that's not the way we do things in this family. Those messages are very subtle often, but they can be direct. It can be literally a toddler having a tantrum, like literally you're the toddler and you're just like having a moment because the world's a big scary
Toddler.
place, and you're scared and you're expressing how you feel, and everything's big and emotional at that time. And mum's mad at you. And mum says to you, like, you're really making mummy upset now. Or maybe it's, come on, like, we've got to get going. And just these subtle things, or be a big girl, it's time to be a big girl. And it's like a toddler can't regulate their nervous system. They cannot calm themselves down. So we learn to suppress ourselves. We learn to neglect and reject those parts of ourselves. We start to, maybe we're told we're too sensitive as well, just because we're a child having normal, healthy emotional expression. And every time we express, we're told, oh, you're so sensitive all the time. She's so sensitive. We start to get this impression that it's wrong or it's unlovable to express those parts of ourselves. And for children, we've got two needs. We have to be accepted. We have to be a part of the group. We've got to belong. We can't be rejected. So all these little quips and comments start to say, I'm going to reject you if you keep doing that. If you keep being you, if you keep feeling these things and being honest with how you feel, you're going to get rejected. Like you're going to be punished in some way. So a child is going to very quickly, over the course of their childhood, start to shut down certain aspects. And the majority of us had some kind of negative comments around emotional expression because it was just the way of things. And our parents just didn't know how to do that for themselves. They were given no space. You look at the generation before, we're talking about typically like war times and all sorts of different things going on. There's no space to healthily express emotion or regulate. There is so much trauma going on in wars. And I mean, our our equivalent of our generation and lifetime would probably be something like the pandemic so far anyway. A lot of people probably haven't even been able to fully process that because there is just such a lack of awareness around how sensitive we actually are allowed to be, how sensitive we need to be, and how okay that is, how healthy that is to be a sensitive person. We've even got this like label, and I'm not saying that highly sensitive people isn't a thing. We've got to kind of like single out certain people and say like they're the really, really sensitive ones. We are all sensitive. Even the people that you see that look really like got it together and super professional and like they never seem to cry, some of those people are even the most sensitive because they've had to shut down so much inside themselves to be able to be like that. And this is kind of like what's wrong with our culture. And then we end up thinking there's something wrong with us inside because we have emotions, because we look around and no one else is expressing and no one else looks as like sensitive as me. So maybe there's something wrong with me. And from there, everything just snowballs and we start to take on all these beliefs about ourselves that generate anxiety in our adulthood and often in our childhood too. Often we're experiencing it even as children.
It's crazy that, one experience, as you said, subtle experiences when you're a child can follow you throughout your adolescence, then into your adulthood, and even to as you grow a lot older. And why does that occur? Why do we hold on to things like that, even if we're not aware that those comments were made or we don't even remember? Why do we hold on to that as condition?
Well, essentially, it's so powerful when we're children. We're learning how to be in the world and how to survive. And we're learning that based on the family group that we grew up in. Once we have reached the age of about 7 years old, most of it's already been set. Our beliefs about ourselves and our beliefs about the world. And it's funny, like we will translate our beliefs about life in reference to how parents treated us. So for example, if you felt as a child that you could never really ask for what you needed or speak up because you were afraid of being a burden to them, you saw maybe your parents worked really hard and they were sacrificing all the time and you just wanted them to be happy. So you thought, I'll just be the good girl, I'll just be quiet, I won't express my needs. And when I do express them, I get in trouble or I get told to just be a good girl. We start to then get this belief that firstly, I can't get what I need. I don't get what I need in the world. I've just got to take what I'm given and be grateful for it and just be that good girl, be the doormat. And then we go into life as adults and we experience the same thing. We start to believe that I've got no control over my life. I've got no power and autonomy in my life. I can't actually go and ask for what I need. I can't ask for the conditions at work that actually allow me to thrive and feel safe. I've got to just put up with the toxic boss or the colleague that's intimidating me and constantly criticizing my work unfairly. I've got to just put up with the partner that disrespects me and, treats me like I'm the last priority because, I've got to just be the good girl. And life is just sort of something I have to kind of allow to just come at me rather than have any influence towards. So it's fascinating. But again, we are mostly, as children, our brainwave state is mostly in what's called an alpha brainwave state. From the ages of being a baby till we're 7 years old, we're operating from this sponge-like mind where we're just absorbing. We're not yet really in our critical, analytical thinking kind of mind, which is more when we're in the beta brainwave state, which we're in beta right now because we're talking, we're concentrating, we're thinking, we're critically analyzing. So children, they'll just absorb. And the way we can start to shift this is by exploring our subconscious mind, taking us back into that alpha brainwave state where we're more sponge-like, more malleable, and we can shift those beliefs. And that's why the transformation is much more permanent. When we're doing talk therapy, we're just chatting like we are now. We're not accessing that deeper layer. So it's all to do with the brainwave state that we're in as children. We're just so much more receptive and impressionable and easier to mold, basically.
The body is just phenomenal. The more that you think about it, you just think what we're able to obtain and then carry. And as you said, the different waves that we can jump in and out of. I find it so fascinating.
Yeah.
But on that, I mean, we talk about anxiety as something that is almost, as we said, a message to tell us that we're not in alignment with who we are or what we believe in. How do we really tune into that, and how do we find the answers of who we are and what we do believe in when for so long we've been people pleasing or doing our life based on other people?
Totally. Look, often we will find some of those answers, and it's an amazing thing where we almost come full circle in our lives when we do this work. We start off as kids pretty much naturally just knowing who we are. Like we know what we like. We play the games we like to play. We make mud pies if we like making mud pies. We, jump in a freezing cold ocean if we feel like it. Like we just follow those instincts. Whereas as we get that a little bit older and we're starting to get the conditioning happening, we lose ourselves more and more. And then ideally we hit a point somewhere in our lives where we realize that's not working anymore. And often it will come with the big breakdown or the big like dark night of the soul or the anxiety or the panic attacks. And we realize we've got to change. So we start this process of reclaiming who we are by unlearning what we're not and not learning why we're driven to, be so perfect all the time or put this pressure on ourselves. So many people say to me, it's me putting the pressure on myself. I do it to myself. Never the case. You learnt that from someone. You learned how to put pressure on yourself. And if you take a moment to think back to your childhood, to your upbringing, you'll start to hear actually that voice that tells me I'm being lazy for sitting on the couch watching TV and resting is sounding a lot like fill in the blank. You will start to hear that it's actually a voice that you were conditioned with and started to hear. So we can start to go, okay, that's actually not my voice. And as we go through this process, we reclaim parts of ourselves and we start to notice that our life and what we're filling it with starts to look a lot closer to how we were as the young child and what we were doing when we were in that carefree state. So for me, I spent hours out in nature. I was always kind of out exploring, hanging out with my cat, like just wanting to be immersed in watching nature. I don't know, smelling the leaves, like just touching it, being there. I could entertain myself for hours, and I stopped doing that for a long time. And now my life is obviously I can't do it all the time, but it's much more full of that. I make space for it. It's a real priority for me to feel connected to who I really am. I was very creative as a child as well, lost a lot of that through certain periods of my life. And now allowing space for music, for creativity, for painting is one of those things that brings me back to me. So it's fascinating when we kind of see how we almost travel through this arc. And I suppose when we think about like, what's the point of all of this? Because like, why do we just have to like lose ourselves to find ourselves? Best answer I can come up with is life would be a whole lot more boring if we
Mm.
were hunky-dory and happy the whole time. Part of the process is so that we grow and we learn and we lose ourselves to just find ourselves and find that wholeness within again. But
Mm.
yeah, that pretty much I think sums it up.
Yeah, it's incredible that anxiety is almost a tool, and it's just up to you whether you want to sort of go and explore that and see what that is trying to tell you. And often we do hear, anxiety, it's something that we should sort of avoid and run from and learn to escape. And
Mm.
sometimes we do just need to be able to sit in it and to feel it. What are some tools or strategies for people that, have anxiety that are building up? And instead of running, instead of looking for ways to band-aid it, how can they sit in it and learn to ride the wave and
Mm.
know that something beautiful is potentially going to come out of it?
Well, first thing I'd say is if you are, let's say you're familiar with the Australian coastline and you've grown up swimming in the sea, many of us are used to that feeling of when you're standing on the edge of the ocean. Maybe you're up to like knee depth or hip depth, and the waves are getting pretty big, and you have to at some point just like take that leap and trust that you're going to be okay diving under the big scary wave. And when you come up on the other side, oh, like we feel like, we're rising up out of the sea like the Little Mermaid or something, right? It's just like, oh,
Yeah.
everything's fine. There's a lot of trust in that process, though. You're diving into this big, intimidating wall of water, white water. You can't even see through it. It's just rushing towards you. And it's much the same when we're working with anxiety. It looks very intimidating. It looks very powerful. But if you know the right way to go into it, rather than imagine what happens when we try to resist a wave, when we don't dive at the right time. We get all kind of caught up in it, legs up in the air, sand in your ear. It's the most horrible experience ever. We don't want to have that. So that's kind of what happens for most of us with anxiety. We're resisting it. We don't kind of like have the right technique. And so we just end up, spinning out of control with it. If we learn how to move through that wave, then we have much more of a sense of control. And I talk about this technique in my book. There's a full guidance around this. It's called tuning in. The chapter's tuning in. And one way to think of this is almost like one way to think of anxiety in general is the more that we ignore it, the louder it gets. It's like if you had a dog outside your door barking, trying to get in, and this is like a really persistent dog. It's not giving up. It's just going to keep barking the more you ignore it. You're trying the old ignoring technique and it's just not working. But when we let the dog inside, it starts to curl up, it goes to sleep, it's not going to keep barking. It's much the same with anxiety. If we have this attitude of inviting it in and not ignoring it, it will settle down. So, in order to tune in and do this, in order to dive into the wave or to welcome the anxiety in, it's really a process of closing down your eyes. My process is just a 2-minute, 3-minute process. It doesn't have to take very long. It's not a huge meditation kind of thing, but it is using principles of mindfulness or meditation and just closing your eyes and finding the space inside you where the anxiety is predominantly grabbing your attention and just watching it and staying with it and breathing through it and noticing that you are not this sensation of anxiety. You are watching the sensation of anxiety. Noticing the words that you're using to describe the anxiety. Are you saying to yourself, oh no, anxiety is here. This is the worst thing. I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do this until we spiral into a panic attack? Or are you saying to yourself, aha, hello, anxiety. Anxiety's here. Okay, this is okay. My body can handle this. This is a sensation. It's an intense, challenging sensation in my body, but I can watch it and I can notice it. And what's it doing? Oh, okay. It's just sort of like churning around in there. There's some sensations. What else can I notice about it? Now, if we come from this perspective of neutral interest and curiosity, all of a sudden, guess who's got power over it? And you'll watch this amazing thing happen. And people are just like mind blown when they experience this for the first time and it's such a beautiful thing because they finally see, oh, I am powerful. The anxiety is not more powerful than me. And we watch it dissipate. It's not trying to make it go away. It's not trying to tell it or push it away in any way. You just watch it, almost like your hands are off the steering wheel. You just let it do its thing and it will naturally tire itself out. And it can do this often within just a few seconds of you allowing it to be there without fighting it, without wanting it gone, just saying, all right, I'm feeling anxious right now. And that's
I love
okay.
that.
And from there, to start to explore like more of that message, we can then start to say, I wonder why this is here. What are you trying to tell me, anxiety? And you can get better and better at experiencing what that answer might be. Sometimes it's just telling you need to eat food because you've like skipped lunch and your blood sugar is low. Or it's telling you that you need to get a better sleep because you really slept poorly the night before. Sometimes it's telling us other things too. It might be saying that the people in your life, or a certain person is not a safe person for you. We're so good at blaming ourselves and going, oh my God, this is my anxiety. I've got to like calm my anxiety around this person. Well, what if actually that person is giving you valid signals and reasons to feel unsafe and your anxiety is just telling you that to get away from that person?
Wow. Can people get over this alone, or is it something that you think people should get support with?
Look, I couldn't do it alone. And I think, yes, it's possible. Like we all have an innate healing capacity within ourselves. And I would never say that, I'm never going to take someone's power away and say you can't do it. But it's certainly much more efficient, much faster when you have that guidance with someone. And there are just so many tricks of the mind and ways that it can spiral you into feeling helpless and powerless and believing that that's who you are. There are the moments of doubt along the way where, oh my God, is this even working? Like I'm tired of this. That if you don't have that person with a neutral perspective who can guide you through and keep saying, no, keep going, we can often find that we try. And then unfortunately, we think and we reinforce the belief that it's not possible for us because we just stop trying because we believe the doubt, we believe the fear. And if we did push through, if we just kept going, and this is what people experience when we go into a 4-month container, like in my work, it's like we keep going. You're not stopping on this journey. Even if you have a hard week, we're not going to give up that week. We're going to keep going and we're going to utilize what has come to the surface because it's part of your learning and it's part of you claiming back your power. There's also something in when we explore trauma and what we've been through on the subconscious level, all these beliefs we made about ourselves. Remember I said at the start, we all live in this like limited box where that's what we think is real in our life. That's all we think our potential is. You are it's much easier to see what's outside the box when someone else says, well, have you thought about this? Or have you noticed this? Someone that's not in your box, someone that's standing outside the box can say, well, come over here. Have you thought about that perspective? What about this? And I've needed that in my life many times where I'm like stuck on believing something. And I'm like, oh, I know that this is a limiting belief, but it feels so true. And it's taken that outside perspective to be able to see through it.
And that's amazing. I think that's with everything in life that you do. You really need those outer perspectives to not only guide you, but to just offer something different, a different way of thinking, because as you said, you only see through your lens. This has been an amazing conversation, and I'm so grateful for your time and everything that you have shared. There is one last thing that I would like to ask in your own journey and what has led you to where you are today. But what is your one takeaway or your biggest life lesson that you feel that you've learned thus far?
I think it's got to be just that, like, who we are as human beings. And I've heard people talk about this truth for a long time. And I think it's a gradual process of really sinking into what it really means. But the love in us is so much more powerful than the fear.
Mm.
That would have to be my greatest, like, and most proud, like, lesson to really feel the truth of. There is so much, and I know it kind of sounds a bit cliche as well, but it's just love is so healing. There's so much inside us that we're afraid to express. And if we express that with someone who is feeding back to us pure loving energy, all of a sudden that fear, that shame, that thing that we think is so horrible about us just melts away and we experience healing. Love heals trauma. Love heals anxiety. So the more that you can come back to the love in you and the love in your heart, the more you'll come back to the truth of who you really are. You are love. We all are at the baseline. We've just got all these layers of fear on top of us. So I suppose whenever I feel like I'm falling out of that balance or kind of finding some anxiety come up for me or fear, I just remember to come back to my heart and come back to the truth of what we really are as beings. And that is just such a centering thing. But it's not like I picked that up overnight. It was like a years and years of sitting with it and experiencing it and now watching over and over how healing love is for the people that I work with.
That's incredible. I think my takeaways, even just from this, is that listen to your body. It is sharing amazing messages to you. And as you mentioned, like love just cures all. There's always going to be fear. You're not going to be fearless, but I feel like we're a student of life and we're constantly learning, and it's something that we're never going to stop doing. And if you walk through it with love, you can't really mess it up. I
You
think
can't.
you just keep going forward and you just keep experiencing and letting in amazing people and sometimes not so great people, but everything's a lesson. I think that's the
Yeah,
beauty of it.
yeah, exactly. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much for coming on and being part of the Secret Sunday session. Now, where can people find you and purchase your book? Also, for my own reference, because I feel like I need to go buy this book.
Well, you can find the book in all good bookstores. It's called The Anxiety Reset Method. They're short on copies at the moment, but there's a new edition in Australia being released in June,
Amazing.
which is like more pocket size too, which is really nice. So you can like carry it around more easily. Not pocket size, but it's just smaller than the first one we released. And then I've got a website, georgiecollinson.com, and my Instagram at Georgie the naturopath is where I hang out the most and am most active.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And congratulations on your own journey, which getting you to where you are today. It's a phenomenal that you're able to be in a space where you can not only continue to help yourself, but help others out there. So thank you for all that you do. And thank you for being of service to our community today as well.
My absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much, everyone, as well, for joining us for another Secret Sunday session. We will catch you all again very soon.